The darkness of space was silent, cold, and endless, but something was coming. Beyond Pluto, where the light of the sun was nothing more than a distant glow, a disturbance rippled through the void. A fleet of colossal warships emerged from hyperspace, their black hulls absorbing all light. They moved like shadows, silent and terrifying. The Draxen had arrived. For centuries, this alien race had traveled from one star system to another, conquering, enslaving, and erasing entire civilizations. They did not negotiate. They did not take prisoners. Their only goal was complete domination. And now, their eyes were set on Earth. The warning. On Luna Base, the largest human outpost on the Moon, radar stations picked up the incoming fleet. Lieutenant Mark Reynolds, a young officer monitoring deep space scans, frowned as strange signals filled his screen. "Commander, you need to see this," he said, his voice tight with fear. Commander Elena Vasquez stepped forward, eyes narrowing as she studied the readings. "Multiple unidentified ships," she murmured. "Too large to be asteroids. And they're moving fast." A moment later, the station's eye warning system blared through the base. "Incoming hostile fleet DTKTE. Estimated time to Earth's orbit, 72 hours." The room fell into stunned silence. Then, chaos erupted. Messages were sent to Earth's High Command. Defense systems were put on high alert. The United Earth Defense Force, UEDF, humanity's military force against extraterrestrial threats, was mobilized. But deep down, everyone knew the truth. This was no ordinary threat. This was a war humanity might not survive. Humanity's response. On Earth, inside the Global Military Command Center, leaders from every nation gathered in a tense meeting. A hologram flickered in the center of the room, showing the approaching Draxen fleet, dozens of warships, each the size of a city, moving in perfect formation. General Damian Hayes, the supreme commander of UEDF, slammed his fist on the table. "This is it," he said grimly. "We always knew something like this could happen. We fought pirates, rogue AI, and small alien raiding parties. But this is an invasion." The room fell silent as the hologram shifted, showing images of destroyed planets left behind by the Draxen. Charred wastelands, dead worlds, no survivors. President Eleanor Carter, the leader of the United Earth Federation, looked at the gathered commanders. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were filled with steel. "We do not surrender," she said. "We fight." The order was given. Earth's armies were mobilized. Space fleets were armed. Battle stations across the solar system prepared for war. The enemy's message. Then, as the world braced itself, the Draxen spoke. A transmission was received across every screen, every device, every station from Earth to Mars. A hollow, cold voice echoed through the airwaves. "We are the Draxen. We have claimed thousands of worlds. You are weak. You are nothing. Kneel before us, and we may allow some of you to serve. Resist, and your species will be erased." The message ended. The people of Earth watched in shock, in anger, in defiance. Then a response was sent back. It was simple. It was clear. And it came from Ryan Carter, the legendary UEDF war hero. He stood before the camera, his face calm but his voice burning with fury. "To the Draxen, this is Earth, and we do not kneel." The war had begun. The countdown to battle. With only 72 hours before the Draxen fleet reached Earth, preparations moved at a desperate pace. Mars' defense grid was activated, placing heavy railguns and orbital cannons on full alert. Luna Base deployed its fighter squadrons, ready to intercept. The UEDS war fleet, made up of humanity's most powerful ships, prepared for the first wave. But deep down, everyone knew. The Draxen had technology far beyond anything humanity had ever faced. Their warships were stronger. Their weapons were deadlier. Their forces were ruthless. If Earth lost this battle, there would be no second chance. As the Drahaxan fleet drew closer, Ryan Carter stood aboard the UEDF flagship, Valor, staring at the massive warships on the screen. "Let them come," he muttered. "We'll show them what humanity is made of." And with that, the greatest war in human history was about to begin. The countdown had ended. The Drahaxan fleet had entered the solar system, their massive warships cutting through space like silent predators. Humanity had no time left. The battle for survival had begun. The first attack, Mars burns. The first target was Mars Colony, humanity's second home. Over 3 million people lived in the domed cities, believing the red planet would be their future. But to the Drahaxan, it was nothing more than an obstacle. The attack came without warning. A Drahaxan dreadnought, larger than an entire city, entered orbit and fired a single shot. A massive energy beam sliced through the Martian defense grid like it was paper. Shields failed. Cannons exploded. Soldiers screamed as the impact sent shockwaves across the planet. Within minutes, half of Olympus City, Mars' largest settlement, was wiped off the map. Earth's response. The counterattack begins. On the UEDF flagship Valor, Ryan Carter watched in horror as the feed from Mars cut to static. The first strike had cost thousands of human lives. His fists clenched. "Enough waiting," he growled. "Send in the fleet. We're hitting them back. Hard." The UEDF battle fleet, Earth's most powerful warships, launched from the Luna base and Earth's orbit, heading straight for the enemy. 500 starships in formation. 200,000 soldiers preparing to fight. Every weapon humanity had locked and loaded. The first real battle between humans and the Drahaxan was about to begin. Clash in space. Humanity fights back. The void of space erupted with fire. The UEDF's dreadnoughts and cruisers unleashed everything they had: railguns, missile barrages, and plasma cannons, aiming for the Drahaxan warships. The enemy, in return, fired their deadly energy lances, tearing through several human vessels in an instant. Explosions filled the darkness. Ships broke apart. Bodies drifted into the void. But humanity did not retreat. Ryan Carter led Strike Team Omega, a squadron of elite fighter pilots, as they weaved through enemy ships. Their job: take down the Drahaxan flagship. Flying at breakneck speed, Carter's squadron dodged incoming fire, their smaller, faster ships dancing between the enemy's slow, heavy vessels. "Lock onto their command ship," Ryan ordered. "Hit them where it hurts." Missiles streaked through space. Fighters zipped between enemy defenses. The Drahaxan, for the first time, hesitated. They had underestimated humanity. The turning point. A desperate gamble. The battle raged on for hours. Both sides suffered massive losses. Then, the UEDF lost its flagship Titan. A single devastating shot from the Drahaxan split the ship in half, killing thousands of soldiers in an instant. Earth's forces were losing ground. The fleet was outmatched. Ryan Carter had to make a choice. "We need to take out their flagship," he said through the comms. "If we cut off the head, the rest might fall back." It was a suicidal plan, but it was the only chance humanity had. A heroic sacrifice. Ryan and his remaining fighters charged toward the Drahaxan command ship, dodging enemy fire as they closed in. Inside the enemy vessel, Overlord Xyra watched in amusement. "These humans are foolish," he said. "Their small ships are nothing against our shields." But he was wrong. As Carter's fighters got closer, a hidden UEDF battleship, the Solar Wrath, emerged from the shadows. It was a colony ship-turned-war machine, packed with a nuclear warhead designed for one purpose: suicide missions. Commander Vasquez, aboard the Solar Wrath, sent a final transmission. For Earth. And with that, she slammed the ship directly into the Drahaxan flagship, triggering a cataclysmic explosion. The enemy flagship was destroyed, and with it, the Drahaxan fleet began to retreat. Victory, but at a cost. The battle was over. For now. Mars lay in ruins. Millions were dead. Hundreds of UEDF ships had been lost. But humanity had won the first battle. As Ryan Carter's ship landed on Luna Base, he removed his helmet and exhaled. This was only the beginning. The Droxen would be back. And next time, there would be no retreat. The solar system was still in shock. The first battle had ended in a human victory, but at an unimaginable cost. Mars burned, the UEDF fleet was crippled, and millions were dead. But there was no time to mourn. Because the Droxen were not finished. They had suffered an unexpected defeat, losing their flagship and being forced to retreat. For the first time in their history, a species had dared to resist them, and survived. To Overlord Syra, this was unacceptable. And now he would teach humanity a lesson they would never forget. The aftermath of the battle. Ryan Carter stood on the bridge of the UEDF flagship Valor, staring at the holographic display of Mars. What had once been a thriving colony was now a wasteland of ash and ruins. Smoke still rose from the craters left by the Droxen's first attack. Half the planet's cities were gone. The death toll was in the millions. "We saved what we could," said Admiral Hayes, her face lined with exhaustion. But this was just the beginning. Ryan clenched his fists. He knew she was right. The Droxen weren't just going to leave. They would return. And next time, they wouldn't make the same mistakes. The enemy's revenge plan. On the Droxen war fortress, hidden deep in space, Overlord Syra paced before his commanders. His golden armor shimmered under the dim lights, his black eyes filled with rage. "These humans are more dangerous than we thought," he growled. "They are reckless, suicidal. They fight even when they should surrender." One of his generals, Commander Vrak, stepped forward. "Shall we prepare another invasion fleet, Overlord?" Syra's lips curled into a cruel smile. "No," he said. "This time, we will not attack their fleets. We will not attack their colonies." He turned toward the star map, pointing to a small blue planet glowing in the center. "This time, we go straight for Earth. Earth's last stand." Back on Luna Base, alarms blared as a new report came in. A second Droxen fleet had been detected. And this time, they weren't stopping at Mars. "They're heading straight for Earth," a technician shouted. Admiral Hayes' eyes widened. "How many ships?" The screen flickered, revealing the answer. Over 1,000 enemy warships, 5 times larger than the First Fleet. The largest invasion force in human history was coming. Ryan exhaled, feeling the weight of what was about to happen. "This is it," he muttered. "The real war begins now." Humanity had won the first battle. But the war was far from over. The countdown had begun. The Droxen fleet, over 1,000 warships strong, was moving at full speed toward Earth. This was not a raid. This was not a warning. This was total annihilation. For the first time in human history, Earth itself was under direct attack. Preparing for the invasion. Inside the Global Military Command Center, the atmosphere was tense. The room was filled with generals, scientists, and world leaders. A massive hologram displayed the incoming fleet, red markers blinking as they drew closer. "They will be in Earth's orbit in 36 hours, said an officer. "We're outnumbered 5-1. General Damian Hayes, leader of the United Earth Defense Force, UEDF, took a deep breath. "Then we use everything we have." Humanity's final line of defense. The entire solar system's military was mobilized. The orbital defense grid, a network of battle stations and satellites, was powered to full capacity. The UEDF fleet, with its remaining 300 warships, prepared for the fight of their lives. Luna Base launched every available fighter, knowing they might never return. On Earth, planetary cannons and anti-orbital missiles were armed, ready to strike the enemy as soon as they entered range. Humanity was outgunned and outnumbered, but they would not go down without a fight. The enemy arrives. At exactly midnight, the sky above Earth ripped open. The Draxan warships exited hyperspace, appearing like shadows against the stars. Their black, metallic hulls reflected the glow of the moon as they surrounded the planet. And then the bombardment began. The sky turns to fire. Without hesitation, the Draxan unleashed their planetary destruction weapons. Massive energy beams rained down from orbit, striking Earth's surface with devastating force. Tokyo, Paris, and Johannesburg were hit first, entire districts reduced to craters in seconds. Luna Base was obliterated within minutes, its last transmission filled with screams. On the ground, chaos erupted as civilians ran for shelter, knowing there was nowhere to hide. But before the Draxan could continue, the orbital defense grid retaliated. From hidden satellites and battle stations, Earth's railguns and plasma turrets fired back, slicing through the enemy's frontline ships. The sky lit up with explosions, turning the darkness of space into a battlefield. The UEDF fleet launched their counterattack. Fighters and warships weaved through enemy fire, launching missiles and railgun shots at point-blank range. The battle for Earth had truly begun. Ryan Carter's last stand. At the center of it all was Ryan Carter, piloting his fighter through the chaos. His squadron had one mission: break through enemy lines and take out the Draxan command ship. "We have to end this now," Ryan shouted. His squadron dove into enemy formations, dodging plasma bolts and returning fire. One by one, his fellow pilots were shot down, their ships exploding in the void. Ryan clenched his teeth. No time to mourn. No time for fear. The Draxan command ship loomed ahead, surrounded by heavy defenses. If they could destroy it, they might cripple the invasion force. But then, something terrifying happened. The superweapon activates. Deep within the Draxan flagship, Overlord Cyrus smiled. "Enough of this game," he hissed. He turned to his officers. "Activate the extinction cannon." A colossal weapon emerged from the side of the command ship, its barrel glowing with dark energy. It wasn't designed for ships. It wasn't designed for bases. It was designed for one thing only: destroying planets. The energy built up, crackling like lightning. Ryan's heart pounded as he saw the weapon charge. They're going to wipe out Earth. A desperate gamble. There was only one chance. The Valor, the UED's last surviving flagship, still had one final weapon: a Doomsday-class nuclear warhead. Ryan made a choice. "This is it," he said. "We take them with us." With the last of Earth's strength, the Valor launched the warhead straight at the Draxan command ship, aiming for its reactor core. The warhead hit. The explosion that shook the stars. The Draxan flagship erupted in a firestorm that tore through their entire fleet. The blast was so massive that even ships that weren't directly hit were caught in the explosion. The extinction cannon never fired. The surviving Draxan warships, leaderless and in chaos, began to retreat. Earth had won, but at a terrible cost. Victory, but at what price? As Ryan's ship returned to Earth, he saw the damage below. Cities were burning. Millions were dead. The fleet was gone. And yet, against all odds, humanity had survived. But deep in the remains of the Draxan fleet, a single escape pod drifted into the void. Inside, Overlord Cyrus still lived, and as he opened his eyes, he whispered one final promise. "This is not over." The battle had been won, but Earth was in ruins. Smoke still rose from shattered cities. Millions lay buried under collapsed buildings, and countless more wandered through the wreckage, searching for loved ones. The once mighty UEDF fleet was almost completely destroyed, with only a handful of warships left drifting in orbit. The world was silent, but it was not at peace. Ryan Carter stood on a broken bridge in New London, staring at the blackened skyline. The city had taken a direct hit during the battle, and now it was nothing more than rubble. He clenched his fists, the weight of the war pressing down on him. They had fought with everything they had. They had driven the Draxan back. But he knew this was far from over. A hidden threat. In the depths of space, far beyond Earth's scanners, a single Dra-Xen escape pod drifted through the void. Inside, Overlord Xyra sat in the darkness, his body weak but his mind sharper than ever. He had underestimated these humans, their will to fight, their recklessness, their refusal to surrender. These were traits he had not accounted for. But now he understood. And next time, he would crush them completely. A soft beep echoed through the escape pod. A transmission flickered to life on the screen before him, displaying a shadowy figure, another Dra-Xen warlord, one even more powerful than Xyra himself. The figure's voice was deep, almost a growl. "You have failed, Xyra," the voice said. Xyra narrowed his eyes. "No, I have learned, and I know what must be done." There was silence. Then, the warlord gave a slow nod. "Then prepare. The real war begins now." Earth's desperate recovery. Back on Earth, world leaders gathered in the remains of the Global Military Command Center. The war had left the planet defenseless. The UEDF was crippled, Mars was in ruins, and their fleets were nearly wiped out. The people were exhausted, mourning, and afraid. But fear was a luxury they couldn't afford. Admiral Hayes stood at the center of the war table, her face hardened by grief, but her voice steady. "We have no time to rebuild. The Dra-Xen are not finished, and neither are we." She turned to Ryan Carter, the man who had led the final charge against the enemy fleet. "We need a plan, a way to strike before they return." Ryan exhaled, running a hand through his sweat-soaked hair. The answer was obvious. The Dra-Xen homeworld was still untouched. Their forces were regrouping. If humanity waited for them to attack again, they wouldn't survive. "We take the fight to them," Ryan said, "before they can recover." The final mission. It was madness. The last war had nearly wiped out humanity, but the Council knew he was right. If they didn't strike now, they would never get another chance. Admiral Hayes turned to the remaining UEDF officers. "Gather what's left of our fleet. Prepare every ship we still have. We are going to war." Across the shattered planet, scientists and engineers worked around the clock to repair damaged warships. Soldiers, wounded and battle-weary, picked up their weapons once more. Humanity had fought for survival. Now, they would fight for victory. As Ryan Carter boarded the UEDF warship Vengeance, he looked out at the stars, knowing that beyond them, the Dra-Xen were waiting. The final battle was coming. And this time, there would be no mercy. The last remnants of Earth's fleet gathered in the darkness of space. The war had nearly wiped them out, but humanity refused to die. Now, with what little strength remained, they were preparing for the boldest mission in history. An assault on the Dra-Xen homeworld. Ryan Carter stood on the bridge of the UEDF warship Vengeance, staring at the holographic display of their target. Dra-Xr Prime, the heart of the Dra-Xen Empire. It was a fortress world, protected by massive planetary shields, and a fleet that dwarfed what little remained of the UEDF. This was a suicide mission. And yet, it was their only chance. The plan. Admiral Hayes addressed the fleet through the communication system. Her voice was calm, steady, a leader who refused to show fear. "We have one objective," she said. "We strike at their leadership, we destroy their command centers, and we make sure they can never wage war against Earth again." The plan was simple but ruthless. A small strike team, led by Ryan Carter, would infiltrate the planet and disable the planetary shields. Once the shields were down, the UEDF fleet would launch an all-out assault on the capital city. Their primary target, Overlord Xyra. Without him, the Dra-Xen forces would crumble. There was no turning back. The infiltration. The Vengeance and a handful of stealth ships slipped through the Dra-Xen patrols, using asteroid fields and sensor blind spots to move undetected. When they reached the planet, Ryan and his team boarded drop pods, hurtling toward the surface like falling meteors. The landing was brutal. Their pods crashed deep inside enemy territory, sending shockwaves through the jungle-like terrain of Draxar Prime. Within seconds, alarms blared. The Draxen elite guard had detected them. Blasters lit up the night as Ryan's team fought their way through the enemy, moving toward the shield generator. They had only minutes before the Draxen fleet realized what was happening. The assault begins. Back in orbit, the UEDF fleet waited for the signal. Every second felt like an eternity. Then, it happened. The planetary shields flickered, then collapsed. Admiral Hayes wasted no time. All ships, attack. The human fleet surged forward, missiles and plasma cannons raining fire on the Draxen strongholds. The enemy's defenses were caught off guard, their command scrambling to respond. The sky burned with explosions. Warships exploded, debris raining down on the planet below. The final confrontation. Deep inside the enemy fortress, Ryan Carter and his squad fought their way to the throne room. Blades clashed, blaster fire echoed through the halls, and one by one, Ryan's team fell, until only he remained. At the top of the throne room steps stood Overlord Xyra, his dark armor gleaming, his golden eyes filled with fury. "You are persistent, human," Xyra growled, drawing his energy blade. "But your kind will never win." Ryan gripped his rifle, his body battered and bruised. "Funny," he muttered, spitting blood. "I was about to say the same to you." With a battle cry, the two warriors charged at each other. The war ends here. Outside, the battle raged on. The UEDF fleet was suffering heavy losses, but they refused to retreat. Inside the fortress, Ryan and Xyra clashed in a brutal duel, neither giving an inch. Sparks flew as their weapons met, the room shaking with the force of their blows. But Ryan was fighting for more than himself. He was fighting for Earth, for the billions who had died, for the future. With a final, desperate strike, he drove his blade through Xyra's chest. The Overlord staggered back, eyes wide in shock. "Impossible," he whispered. Then, with one last breath, he collapsed. Victory. At a cost. The moment Xyra fell, the Draxen forces lost control. Their fleets panicked, their ground troops surrendered. Without their overlord, they were leaderless, broken, and defeated. The war was over. But as Ryan stood over Xyra's body, breathing heavily, he felt no joy, only exhaustion. They had won. But at what cost? Earth was in ruins. The UEDF was almost wiped out. Millions had died. And even though the Draxen had been defeated, Ryan knew something deep inside him. War never truly ends. The war was over. The Draxen Empire had fallen. Humanity had survived. But the cost of victory was unimaginable. A world in ruins. Ryan Carter stood on the bridge of the UEDF warship Vengeance, staring down at Draxar Prime. The once mighty capital of the Draxen Empire was now a burning wasteland, its towering spires reduced to rubble, its people either dead or surrendering. The UEDF fleet, what little remained of it, hovered in orbit, victorious, but barely holding together. Earth had won, but it was not unscathed. Back home, entire cities had been wiped off the map. Nations that had stood for centuries were now nothing but ruins. The survivors would spend decades rebuilding. Millions had died. Entire families had been erased. Ryan clenched his fists. Was this really victory? The last transmission. A crackling message came through the comms. It was Admiral Hayes, her voice weary but firm. "Ryan, it's over. Xyra is dead. The Draxen forces have surrendered. You did it." Ryan exhaled slowly, staring out at the broken battlefield. Did he really do it? Or had they simply traded one horror for another? His eyes drifted to the wreckage of UEDF warships floating through space. So many good men and women lost. But there was no time to grieve. The universe was a dangerous place. Earth was vulnerable now, its military crippled. If another enemy came, would they survive? He shook his head. They had no choice but to rebuild. The surrender of the Draxen. Across the ruined planet, the remaining Draxen warriors knelt in defeat. Many were too wounded to fight. Others simply laid down their weapons, knowing their empire was gone. Ryan walked through the battlefield, his boots crunching over the ashes of the fallen. He passed prisoners of war, some glaring at him with hatred, others too broken to even lift their heads. One young Draxen soldier, barely more than a child, stared up at him, shaking. Ryan hesitated. This war had turned him into a killer, but looking at this frightened, defeated enemy, he knew one thing. It had to end. No more killing, he muttered. Not today. A new beginning. The war had changed everything. Humanity was no longer just another species struggling to survive in the universe. They had defied the odds. They had defeated an empire that had ruled for centuries. But with that victory came a new responsibility. The galaxy now knew what humanity was capable of. Other alien races, once dismissive of Earth, now watched with a mix of fear and respect. Some would come seeking alliances. Others might come seeking revenge. Ryan knew this was only the beginning. As the vengeance turned toward Earth, he looked back one last time at the ruins of Draxar Prime. The war was over, but the future, that was still unwritten.